You're listening to the Light Overtime podcast with David Sargent and Korey Bartos. It is March 27th, 2024. How you doing, David?
I'm doing great. I'm feeling, in the most literal health sense, the best that I've felt for the entire month of March, and it is March 27th. So I've had not a particularly awesome month. I've been fighting this like weird thing that went from a stomach bug to a cold to just a cold that hung around for like 3 weeks. I don't know what was going on, but today I'm feeling great. My voice is sounding back to normal. I had like a hoarse voice for like 2 weeks straight. My coworkers were quite concerned, and everything's feeling great. So I'm good. How are you?
Love that. I'm pretty good too. A lot of bugs going around right now.
I know.
I was feeling kind of weird in my stomach. I was feeling like nauseous a little bit the last few days. My appetite was really low, like Monday, Tuesday. I had a little bit of a cold, like starting up last week. Everybody I know is just like getting sick left and right.
Yeah.
So, something about going to 60 degrees to 20 degrees to 60 degrees to 20 degrees is not.
Yeah, dude. Same thing, man. Like I had no appetite. I couldn't do anything. I was nauseous as well. I went to the doctor, and I never go to the doctor if I don't have to, but it was like a combination of weird things. And they were like, "You just got a cold." And I was like, But they gave me like 3 different things, and I'm like, it's just a cold? Okay. But here I am, so we're all right.
Yeah, that's great. So I have kind of a handful of things that I think we're going to get into a little bit here and there, but I guess I wanted to start off with, in your illness and busyness, have you been able to shoot much?
There was about one day where I was feeling like things were good, and I went out to a lake about a mile south of my house. It's called Lake Angeline here in Ishpeming, and it's pretty cool. So Ishpeming is already on a hill. We're already at a bit more of an elevation than kind of the rest of the UP, even compared to like Marquette. From Marquette, 15 miles east, you just basically go uphill the entire 15 miles until you get to Ishpeming. So we're already uphill quite a ways. Every day I drive to work and back, my ears pop. So I go out to Lake Angeline, and I get there, and there's a boat launch, which was kind of a nice spot to just sit for like a sunrise or something, because where it's at has pretty good visibility across the lake just to see what's coming in and out of the lake. But then if you go up the hill a little bit, there's a trail that starts, and you can follow Lake Angeline's south side all the way to its like southeastern tip. I guess that's the way it runs, west to east, but you can be on the south side of it going from west to east. And the entire time for about 3/4 of a mile, it's also uphill. So by the end of the trail, you're probably like 70 feet over the water looking down at the lake, which is pretty neat. And then throughout that, there's little access points to go back downhill and access like the water level and stuff. So I was just doing a little scouting, more or less. I did get an iPhone, so I took the iPhone out and took some shots with that compared to the 50 mil on the Sony A7 IV, but we can talk about that later. But that was the only day that I had felt good. I tested my luck, and I regretted it. The next day I was feeling like garbage again. So yes, one day I got out.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, we can jump right into your little comparison with the A7 IV and the iPhone. I found it really interesting. I like doing those. It's just fun to see what will come up. And I think it's funny because like, I think for a couple of years now, we can generally say that if the cell phone has good conditions, especially really well lit, you're going to get fantastic images from a phone. You're going to get fantastic images from any digital sensor when it has more light than it needs to take its best dynamic range photo. Like that's just straight up. You can take like a 2004, 2005 camera, like pretty meh, like maybe one of those like you put a floppy or something in the side of it, kind of like 2 megapixel digital sensors. If you give that thing a ton of light, it's going to give you every bit of detail it can capture. And that's just like one part of it. I don't love the fall off on a lot of shallow cell phone stuff. So I was very proud that like you have tells. Mm-hmm. But once you get into kind of you're losing depth of field with both images, absolutely it gets so difficult to tell. The detail captured is so high, especially with the last 2 iPhones. And Yeah, I mean, there's no reason. I still tell people who want to get into landscape photography that they should just keep shooting on their phone for now, because unless you want to dump a decent amount of money into like really nice filters and like learn how to do real like gnarly landscape, that's the post, that's the prep, that's the scouting for the right exact time of day. Your cell phone does so many things that make some of the best landscape and sky images I've ever seen. I still get frustrated as late as, or as early, I guess, as like 2017, 2018. My buddy at camp was like getting these banger sunset shots daily on like a freaking iPhone, like 6 or 7.
Yeah.
And it figured it out.
Yeah.
It knows how to do that. So, yeah, it was good. I think you did a good mix up on the images. If you can send me those like archived shots, I'll throw a couple of them up. But yeah, it was pretty neat. What did you take away from it?
So there's like you were saying, for the last few years, like the last 5 years, honestly, I have also been telling people, if you want to learn the fundamentals of photography and you already have a phone, don't get a camera yet. You can start with your phone and just have fun taking photos while learning some of the most basic things. And most phones have access to some kind of camera, whether it be like you can get Lightroom and access the camera function inside of Lightroom. If you have a phone that doesn't tell you things like shutter speed and ISO, you can change that and see those things in the Lightroom camera functionality in that app to get to learn the cause and effect stuff with photography, because that stuff is important. Maybe not, though, as important as the fundamentals of approaching photography on a broader sense, right? Like learning things like lighting and things in the environment that you want to look for. So, you know what did I learn from this? In the last couple of years, there's been a couple of things that have improved to the point where it's getting harder to tell the difference between the fact that it was taken on a phone or a real camera. One of those things is low light performance. Phones have gotten really smart about how to handle low light scenarios. And so there's some things that phones do in the camera now with like dark mode and astro mode, where it'll take a series of photos, average them out to delete the noise essentially and give you a cleaner image than it could have before. That was the crux of any phone really before, like, I don't know, 2020, maybe 2019. There was not an astro mode in most phones. And I started catching on to some of these phones, maybe like 2019, there was like a Samsung phone or some other phones that were doing like Milky Way photos. And I was like, wow, this is going somewhere. And in the last couple of years, it's really picked up. Portrait mode has gotten impressive. It does have some tells for sure. I think it's overkill most of the time in how much fall off there is. The depth of field tends to be a little bit harsh, and certainly its masking is not perfect, and I don't think we're going to see it be perfect for a couple generations yet, or as close to perfect as it could possibly be. And then the last thing is, without adding like lens modifiers, we've gotten to the point now with this thing, I have 1, 2, and 3x telephoto lenses that are really pretty impressive. In the past, when you try to zoom in on a phone, you could really see how badly like the file falls apart with regards to like resolution and sharpness and all these things. Where now, if I hit the 3x and I take a photo of a landscape scene, you probably aren't going to be able to tell that I did that. You know, the keen-eyed might, but for the most part, if you tried to 3x on a phone from like 5 years ago, it's not going to look anywhere as good as what they can do now. Those three things have, I think, the most advancements in the last couple of years. And in general, just you start using your phones if you really are interested in photography and you don't have a camera yet. You really have so many impressive tools in your pocket already. But for those of you who know how to use a camera, of course, you're going to get so much more out of it because of all kinds of customization, all kinds of natural effects from the physics of a lens with something like a 51.4. You can do a lot of really creative things. Of course, we don't have to dive into all that, but There wasn't actually a whole lot more I learned from that outing, but I am impressed with the iPhone 15 Pro. It's a heck of a tool.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still at the 13 Pro, I think, and like I say, if I'm snapping something for just like to remember a thing, I think that's like 90% of why I have a camera phone. Is I was like, oh, I need to remember that, and I just like take photos. But if I want to take a photo, even to post into my Instagram story just really fast now, I always go right into Lightroom. And I always use the Lightroom camera because I can do kind of the edits that I do on my real photos. Heck, I even did a freaking sky shot yesterday that had no business having the amount of detail it did. And I think that was on a 3x lens on the 13 Pro.
Yeah.
And the like what you can do with the DNG RAW out of the freaking iPhone, especially pushing colors and stuff, just like I would with my Sony, it's incredible.
It is.
So like,
yeah,
it's wild. Obviously the portrait mode is usually where the tell happens, and I think obviously you were just snapping stuff and playing with it, but I think when you see somebody who hasn't experienced depth of field in photography, it'll be the same issue as if they were to go out and get a camera and get a nifty 50. They'll have that thing at 1.8 every single time. All of their shots will be at 1.8, so all of their shots will be blurry. They'll be out of focus. They'll be missing focus all the time. And I think this happens to new photographers. It happened to me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying that this is a thing that, when I got my first really fast prime, I was missing the eye. We didn't have eye autofocus yet. So I was getting like eyebrows and noses all the time. But I thought they looked amazing because they had this shallow depth of field and it wasn't a kit lens anymore. But that also happens with portrait mode where they're like, oh, I want it to be as blurry as possible. And then you see like a part of a shirt or like one strand of hair that should absolutely be in focus with the plane of everything else, but it just gets nuked, and then they try to blur it because the masking just is a little off, right? But if you use portrait mode correctly and you back that off a little bit, which you can, and you're not like using it wide open, you're like, no, this shot needs to be like f4, the camera will get a little smarter and go, okay, I can play with a lot more of what's in this frame and I can detect a lot more of this subject and it will look cleaner. You'll sacrifice a little bit of that milkiness, but for what? Like, the difference is believing it or not.
Yeah. I was relatively impressed. I did have to back off the depth of field on like 90% of the portrait mode shots that I took. I do think that there's still some areas where it'll make mistakes. It'll find certain things that were not in that plane of field and then try to make it or it'll miss the masking essentially. So like that happened a couple of times. This is my first iPhone in over a decade, so I don't know, if it's gotten much better in the last couple of generations. My last phone was a Pixel 5, and portrait mode in that generation was just starting to really gain some traction. So I don't know if it's much better or worse or not, but that only happened a couple of times. For the most part, I was pretty impressed. Outside of that, I did notice that the Sony Creators app was really smooth. So my previous experience on the Pixel, there was some lagginess, some bugginess, and it was slow to transfer. It was much quicker to transfer photos on this with original sizes. So I was pretty impressed. And overall, just as a side note, as somebody who hasn't used an iPhone in a long time, I kind of knew this about iPhones, but everything that the iPhone is designed to do so far, it just does flawlessly. I think that's part of the Apple sphere of products, right? Everything that it's supposed to do, it does perfectly. I haven't run into bugs. I haven't run into anything that I thought was unintentionally quirky. There are definitely some things that I think Apple does intentionally quirky.
They make bold decisions sometimes.
But I'm learning to adjust to that, and so far I'm pretty happy. So
yeah. I mean, and that's what I've always said, right? Like, especially if you're dealing with kind of maybe a more esoteric or niche like third-party app, iOS devs are plentiful. iOS gets development pretty fast in most cases. You're going to see stuff roll out to iOS on a lot of major platforms a lot sooner. And it's because of the ecosystem that they built. So when you're dealing with one operating system with one chip that all kind of works together, And these devs know that if I make it and it works under this condition, it's going to work under all of those conditions. So we're going to push that out. It's going to work. But if you have all these different Snapdragons, this and that, and all this other stuff with all these other random parts, you know, my Samsung might be running flawlessly, but so-and-so's Ultra 23 Plus or something is like really buggy this month or whatever. And that's just the nature of the beast. So for me, when I realized that I was getting more unhappy back when I was on Android, and I finally switched over to, I think I've been on the iPhone since the 4G. But I went from the 4G to the 7 Plus to the 11 Pro to the 13 Pro. So I definitely wasn't like a get an iPhone every year kind of guy.
Yeah.
I basically leaped through hyperspace every time.
Yeah, that's me too. But, like 3 or 4 gen. Yeah, I let it go quite a ways.
Yeah. So it's always breathtaking.
Yes.
It's always been absolutely nuts for me to go to the next one. And the only reason I went to the 13, I'd probably still have an 11 Pro right now if I didn't lose my phone in Asia. So, so here we are. I'm definitely not really interested in getting the 15. I love that it's on freaking USB-C. You know, my partner has all Apple stuff, and she has a 15, and the fact that it's all becoming like you can use MagSafe or you can use USB-C.
Yes.
And then you have a phone that's USB-C, and all my camera stuff and all of my other stuff is USB-C. I'm just like, oh, I cannot wait to throw away my Thunderbolt cable.
Yeah.
And never deal with it.
If they didn't move to USB-C, I don't think I would have considered an iPhone. So it was kind of on the edge for a while now, but that one was like the last tipping point. It was a good move.
Yeah, it's huge. It's definitely super awesome.
Yeah.
I guess I'll use that to go into like my next little bit of what I've been kind of shooting and following up, because lately I think I mentioned that I was starting to play around with the iPad Pro last time. And the model that I'm using is a 12th gen. Love the Apple Pencil still. I think it's phenomenal. I've never used a stylus in my life that's as good as the Apple Pencil.
I believe that.
But for work, I've been taking photos that I either take now or I've been going back through my backlog and finding a bunch of old ones I wanted to kind of repurpose. I've been labeling all the like components of the guns and stuff that I use at work and using my handwriting in Photoshop and labeling them like this is that, like literally drawing arrows and like doing scribble and everything and like writing instead of like using text and doing graphic design. I've just been writing. And I absolutely love the process. They've been some of the best posts that we've had perform on our channels for
that's
a
super
while.
Cool.
You know, we went from like getting tanked to, I mean, and I've talked about it before, but the gun industry is really, really saturated and meta and everybody hates us.
Yeah.
So we don't get recommended to non-followers very often and things like that. And again, just oversaturation, right? So you just can't release crap or people won't see it because like there's just so much of it. It's like stop posting the same cool thing you think is dope and actually make something that's worth looking at. And that's 90% of the challenge. I'd say like 10 to 25% max is actually like the platform is punishing you for being what you're into. And that has to be clear because there's literal freaking prawn on Instagram and I'm so sick of seeing it. So I went from, you know, a couple of posts doing like 300 to 600 likes to like jumping past 2,000 easily on some of these posts.
That's cool.
But the process is super nice. It's not my iPad, so I haven't fully taken it over. So I haven't been able to like do a photo shoot, dump all the photos into it, and then do that. Because it's still connected to her iCloud and things. So I don't want to just like just absolutely decimate her her accounts. But I've been just like uploading one or two at a time and kind of playing with them, and I'm just obsessed. I think it's great.
That sounds like a neat workflow.
It's super cool, and I haven't done a whole lot of importing straight from the card like I started to last time I was here, because then I was like, oh, Photoshop with an iPad is almost the Photoshop on the desktop. You know what I mean? Like the Lightroom on the iPhone and like the Photoshop Express on the iPhone, it's basically nothing. It feels like an app. It feels like an old, 10 years ago, there's an app for that kind of vibe. It does not feel like a full suite. But Photoshop and the freaking iPad Pro with the Apple Pencil feels fantastic.
Have you used any of the generative fill features on the iPad?
I haven't actually yet.
Okay.
I haven't had to. I haven't done like really, really in-depth Photoshop stuff, but the remove tool, which has been kind of replacing in some cases the spot healing tool. If you're not familiar with the new CC, for those listening, if you don't have like a modern subscription to have all the updates, I'm basically only on the beta versions of Photoshop right now. I don't even install the normal one. And yeah, they have an update like every week. The generative fill's getting better. The remove is super nice. And depending on how much you're doing, I've realized that you can turn off remove after every swipe. And then so you can sit there and just start drawing, and it'll put little red marks on all your stuff. And then you click go, and then you can step away for it. Because like the remove tool is definitely slower than spot healing. So it's a little challenging. And that's true on the desktop and true on this. And like I have a 12 core and a 3090 at work, so like it's not a hardware issue. It is just the suite and how it works. But yeah, it's been super cool. I'm excited to get into a little bit less work related stuff and utilize it, because it's definitely a more fun way to edit. I really think it's intuitive to zoom in with my fingers really fast when I'm trying to pixel peep and get a little couple things removed.
Totally.
There's been small caveats, but I'm not sure yet if it's just me not understanding how to use all of the tools in a touch screen like environment versus my mouse and keyboard. And some of my actions aren't in there and things like that. So I'm like a little slower at some stuff, but this is the most excited I've been about like trying to go back in and really start making compositions and like doing some heavy Photoshop stuff.
I will say I can relate, but it was a long time ago. Back in 2015, I purchased the Microsoft Surface Pro 3, I think it was. And I have been a fan of the Surface product lineups for a while. I'm actually on a Surface laptop right now. The Surface Pro 3 at the time, I had a lot of fun with Lightroom. It was not a performing machine. It was real slow, but it was fun to use that platform, that format of carry it around, use this. I did use a stylus for a little while. I'm sure it's not nearly as good as the Apple Pencil, but it was just fun. I remember doing photo shoots with models, and we'd take photos and then I'd dump them on the Surface, and then we'd sit down and have coffee and look at them together and swipe through, and that was a really fun kind of platform to work with. It was less professional and more fun, but I'm sure with your setup you could get a lot more work done. But I can relate a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just, man, it's just incredible. Like, it doesn't feel like the hardware is hindering me anymore.
That's awesome.
Like all of that kind of niche stuff always kind of was. It was always just, there's a caveat to you thinking it was really sweet. You're talking to a kid that had a PDA when he was in like fifth grade, because he thought it was the coolest technology of all time.
It was.
It was sweet. I'll probably get a bunch of flack from at least one person to be like, "Wow, this Korey's such a freaking nerd, dude." But yeah, so that's been fun. Been still using that new Polar Pro like circular polarizer a lot more. And it's wild how much I actually like look for ways to use it, and it's become part of my like in the process of taking a shot compositional like thing.
Yeah.
Super useful tool. Again, I'm shooting a lot of like metallic and other like hard surfaces. I'm doing a lot of product stuff obviously, but like I've been shooting inside the CNC machines lately, and it's been super helpful with that. Super rad. I'm really into it. I want to do some tests with Flesh, because I'm not completely convinced that like I should have a circular polarizer on all the time, and I really want to know what it does to like oily skin and things like that. And that's one of the things I haven't really been able to experience with yet. And there's been a couple of things that I've photographed that I wasn't sure if it was like actually just genuinely bad or not, or if like it was just always going to be kind of a subpar photo. So I couldn't tell if it was because the circular polarizer was just like kind of set funky and it made the colors in the shot look weird, or if the colors were just weird because of reflections or something. I don't have that much experience with a CPL, like I said.
So I have some experience with the CPL for sure. I can say that it shouldn't mess with your colors a lot unless the glass is giving an overall cast, which could be, I've seen brown casts in a lot of different filters, and CPLs I've seen it before too. And for the most part, the biggest effect it's going to have outside of doing its job is you might lose like a third or 2/3 of a stop of light at its strongest setting. Outside of that, you shouldn't see a lot of color effects. So that could be weird.
I might have misspoke. I think I was referring to like if the colors were funky because of the scene.
Oh.
Or if it was like, because what happens when you kind of flatten out the like reflections, like some of the highlights, because it's also a mist filter.
Uh-huh.
So it's doing kind of two things. And I'm not sure if like that makes like skin look kind of putty-like unrealistic.
Oh, I could see
like
that.
Taking away. And like that's kind of what I've been noticing. So and when you take away some of that highlight, some of color reflection, like say there's grass under you, but you don't see the grass in the shot, but then there's this greenness. But then if you get rid of the highlight, it's going to show a little bit more of that greenness. So I was like, I'm not sure if like this sickly skin tone I'm getting is because I pulled too much of the highlights off it. Yeah. I don't think this is casting a single color issue. Like it's such a
I
clean
would
piece of
imagine
glass.
Not. High quality ones usually don't. But I could totally
Polar Pro
see
gets it.
what you're talking about. If the like high luminance is in the greens, if that's being reflected and you pull the luminance down and the saturation still there, you might see a little bit more of the color than the brightness where it was, close to clipping or whatever beforehand. But that's interesting though. And I haven't used any mist filters, but I can say that I have a lot of good memories of finding out what scenarios a CPL works best for. And in fact, I don't know if you don't mind me talking about it, I just grabbed a few more filters, unless you had some more to say about your Polar Pro.
No, that's kind of it. What did you get into?
Yeah, so I kind of went nuts a little bit. I didn't get anything like super high end, but I did get inspired because we were talking about the solar eclipse coming up, and I think you had mentioned the Polar Pro filter last week or the week before. Yeah. So I went and got a bunch of K&F filters. What I don't know, I've used a couple of their filters in the past, years ago. So I felt pretty good about it. And when I got these ones, these are like their Nano X series, and I guess they have like 3 tiers of what's good, better, best, and this is like their best or whatever, but it really wasn't that much more expensive. And I got a ND, let's see, I got I'll start with the first round of filters I got. I don't know if you noticed this on my stories, but when I went out to Lake Angeline, I had brought 2 filters with me that I was really excited about. And what I learned was that you cannot put, I'm going to put this in quotes, variable ND filters on a wide angle lens on a full frame camera. And maybe you have different experience, but I have never used a variable ND filter on a full frame camera with a 20 mil lens, and I got this crazy X pattern with like shadows and weird like X formations. Do you have experience with variable NDs on full frame?
Was it? Yeah, I use variable NDs more than any other filter. I almost have them glued to my camera. I've usually, depending on the way the polarizers are on your ND filter, that's usually, you can usually create the X by going past it if it doesn't have hard stops.
Yeah.
So some NDs, a lot of my NDs now have hard stops, so you can't go beyond or before it. So there's only like probably a quarter or a fifth of the actual circle, the circumference of the thing is going to have the effect. But if you go beyond it, those polarizers will cross and you'll get the X.
So,
because I was running in the Philippines, I was running a 6-9 on the 20.
That's really interesting because I rotated the thing multiple times on both. I had 2, by the way, on both, and there was not a single point where it was the full effect, where there was no X. So I was really confused. One of them was a 1-9, so that's pretty extreme. And the other was a 2-6 that also had a CPL stacked on the end of it. So those are 2 different kind of extreme filters, I suppose, in the variable ND space. So I wasn't sure if I just tried to go a little bit too hard on what I could do with a variable ND, but it was my first experience on a full frame wide angle setup using a variable. So it didn't work out very well. I sent those back and I got a hard 10 stop and I got a CPL for the 50, and then I also got a CPL for the 150 to 600 Sigma. So a big old chunky 95 millimeter CPL. And it just like, it never occurred to me that I use that lens over the water all the time.
I instantly pictured what that would do to like a bird breaching the surface of the water instantly.
Like, why?
You love that gnarly side light too. And it's going to be beautiful for cutting out a lot of that.
Yeah. I mean, in the very beginning of a sunrise, your light is not, I mean, I guess it kind of is coming from a 90. And then at the end of a shoot with those, it's coming from a 45. So there are two periods of time during a sunrise or a sunset where it would actually be really beneficial to have a CPL on if you wanted to cut the highlights out from reflections. And it just never occurred to me all these years of shooting wildlife that could be a beneficial thing. So I grabbed that. I'm really excited to test that out. And I have one more filter I'm stupid excited about. It is it's like I found this thing. It's like a $20 filter, and it's an infrared filter, but it is a variable infrared filter in such that you can vary the frequency of the color wavelength that it allows through. And I'd never seen this before. I wasn't searching for this. I was searching for a specific, I think it was like a 650 nanometer, because I looked up charts for what certain frequencies, the effects they'd have. And it seemed to me like 650 was around like the most contrasty look with good like color preservation, and I wanted to find a filter like that, but I was only finding like 720s and 750s, and they were like low contrast but a little more high key, and I've played with those before. So I stumbled upon this one that said 520 to 7, maybe it was 560 to 760 nanometer, and I was like, that's weird. Can you change it? And I looked in the descriptions and I saw the pictures, and yeah, you can change it. It's just a circular variable filter, and you just change it anywhere in between. So I'm really excited to play with that and experiment with like all the wavelengths from one end to the other, because I have no experience with anything other than like a 750, so that'll be fun.
Right. I've never used any of them on a standard camera, but I have one for my full spectrum. And so I have a full spectrum modified A7S III at work, for those who don't know. And I have a couple of fixed infrared filters, but I have a variable one. And it's super interesting because the different lasers for different firearms, and then the different IR lights all run at different things. Basically, the newer and more fancy they are, the higher the nanometer. Like we're getting past like 900 nanometers and like flashlights that are IR and stuff like that. So that'll be like the next gen stuff. So there's like tiers of warfare and all this other crazy stuff that's involved in like, Gen 2 to Gen 3, night vision, phosphor tubes and things like that. All that jargon. But it's interesting to kind of play with that while you know that there's several different lasers that are emitting IR lasers at different frequencies, and trying to figure out like you can almost, if you know the specs of the lasers, you know what people are using just by spinning that and knowing like higher or lower or what laser they have. Or you get a pretty educated guess. You can rule out a lot of lasers.
Sure.
But yeah, so now that makes me want to play with that on my actual camera, though, because I've never done it on a standard sensor camera.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have used a regular like 760, like it doesn't adjust, and I had a lot of fun with that back in like 2015. Some of my early stuff, I was playing with infrared filters on the Nifty 50 and on like a Sony A55, A65, one of those two cameras. So way long ago, when having to expose like for an extra like 5 stops or whatever it is that those filters bring you down. It was almost always experimenting with long exposures, which is fun. That's stuff I liked to do anyway. But now fast forward almost 10 years where ISO performance is so good, I can keep my shutter high, and 51.4 with an infrared filter. I can play with stuff that doesn't necessarily have to be super long exposure, especially if I'm experimenting with the wavelengths of nanometer that it allows through. So it's nerdy, it's weird, and it's gonna kind of inspire me to shoot kind of like I did when I was a kid, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I'm gonna tag along with that little adventure and see where it takes me. I'd like to at least know more about it.
For sure.
Be able to explain what's happening. It might actually help with my understanding of shooting that full spectrum camera better.
Yeah.
One of the quirks, I won't get too in depth here with it, but one of the quirks with that sensor is that the color channels don't work the way you think they would, and when you take raw files, for instance, into Lightroom, or if you're even taking the S-Log footage into, because it starts from a totally different space. So I've realized to keep it more reasonable, I have to go like minimal, like the coolest you can take the color temperature, and then really play with the tint. And then you can kind of fake it to look almost as though it's just dark and maybe true to life for the most part, with some other colors popping in. And then I had helped a couple of guys in the industry who was like trying to get good like photo edits from it. And I kind of have I have it written down somewhere so I don't forget, but it's like kind of what the calibration, the Adobe calibration and Lightroom can do to kind of get you close to something that feels like it's not just like weird blown out, like somebody played with all your HSL and it's all a mess now, because that's what full spectrum feels like. If you're not prepared for it, it's pretty crazy. But yeah, that's super exciting. I definitely think we should chat, not in the show, more about that and get back in some photo talk, because I run freaking NDs and everything. I actually have been wanting to do more. I'm prepping to do more landscape and street photo stuff, but I want to try and get some really nice shutter drag type street images while I'm in Paris and London next week. I leave Sunday. I'm freaking out. And yeah, so that'll be super motivating, because a little bit of kit sometimes goes a long way to excite.
Now, I know you would have told me by now, seeing as you only have a week left, but did you get a shipping confirmation for the Fuji?
You don't know that I would have told you, because I probably would have held it off and died with that secret. But I haven't, and it's devastating. I'm taking the Sony. I'm going to take the 35. That's all I'm taking. My mom, it was actually kind of adorable. My mom messaged me asking me a couple of questions about the trip, and then asked if she could only take one lens, what one would she take? Which was a really good question. I didn't expect it. I figured she was either going to like just take her 50, which on a crop sensor camera would have been an awful travel lens. Or she would have like brought her whole freaking bag or something, right? But I told her to she's got like the standard zoom, which is like a crazy, I can't remember if that one's f4 to 7.1. It's like super obnoxious, but like for what she wants to even have the raw photos will be huge. We're going to take a bunch of photos with our cell phones. Like I already know that's going to happen, but I'll have my freaking camera, and I know she's going to lean on me to take like really nice pictures of us and of things.
As she should.
But it'll be fun. It'll be fun because I do want to like spend some time just doing photography with my mother.
Heck yeah. Probably
not going to do this again for a very long time. So, but yeah, so I recommended, she's got an R10 and to take the 24 to 70. 24 to 70 or 24 to 105. Maybe it's a 105 f4 to it's the kit. I would have never looked at it ever again, but yeah, I think it'll be fun, and she'll be able to do, I think it is 105, which will be great, because if there's something that I want to shoot that's super far away, it'll be freaking 7.1, but at least I'll have a good photo of it.
Yeah. I think I would be the freak to take the 50. I don't think, with what I have a 20 and a 50. I don't think I would take the 20.
No, but remember, it would be a 75. It'd actually be closer to a 78 on an R10, because it's a 50 mil on a crop body.
You're right.
I would take a 50 mil if that was the only thing I had. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't take a 85 mil.
Forgot about the crop factor. Yeah, no, definitely not.
Yeah,
the 50 is pushing it for me even, but yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll have the 35. I shot a bit of APS-C mode stuff this week.
Okay.
At work, just like playing around with it. I have it on a custom button now, so I can, if I really want something and I don't want to like play around. I just want to make sure I can get the composition. I can switch to like the 50 equivalent while I'm traveling, because I think it will probably come in handy. But yeah, I have a lot of excitement, but I have some preparation that I've put off for a good long while that I'm going to have to do probably tomorrow night or something like that.
Sure.
Speaking of 50s, the main thing that I figured we would talk about today is the Sigma 51.2 that was announced.
Yeah.
For a miraculous $13.99.
Yep.
Which is very premium for a prime lens from Sigma, but not at all what I expected for a 51.2 fully autofocused, the whole deal. Now, I, for once, have been busy enough that I didn't even watch Petapixel's video on this lens.
Ooh, I did. Haha, I'm ahead of you.
Yeah, so you're the guy today. I want to know what your vibes are comparing to what we know about the 50s, comparing to what you know about your 51.4. Who's this for? Is it something that you're interested in, et cetera, et cetera?
Seeing as I already have a 51.4 and it's the Sigma and we know it's sharp and it performs well, I'm not interested in a 51.2 just in general. I just wouldn't be. It's not something I'm going to reach above, for $13.99. If I didn't already have the 15.1.4, sure, I'd consider it for sure. Like, no doubt, if I was in the space to buy a fast 50, that would be the one, probably. The sample photos that I'd seen, and what they were talking about, really well controlled chromatic aberrations, like really well controlled. Ghosting, not much of an issue throughout the aperture, like shooting into the sun. Everything in general just looks really well controlled. And I think Petapixel's video described the bokeh as some of the best they've ever seen, as far as background blur and like bokeh balls being perfectly circular. It looks fantastic. That being said, it's a 51.2, whereas I have a 51.4. It's not a drastically different lens. It looks like it's fantastic, and I don't know that there's much else to say. If you're in the space to buy a 50 that's fast, that's probably the one.
Damn. What was said comparing it to the G Master?
I don't think I watched a video that compared them directly side by side. Okay. I think Jared Polin has a video coming out, or just put out a video that I haven't watched yet, where he does. I remember reading his overalls, though, being, if you're a professional, you still want to pick the Sony. Otherwise, the 51.2 is perfectly fine. And that's pretty good praise coming from him, because he's usually like, get the best of the best, and the glass always matters and things like that.
I mean, I'd say that's pretty standard for Jared Polin. He normally says you should always just go with the first party one. And that's true, because if you're going to shoot like an A9 III, you're going to lose features. You're just going to lose features. Yeah. But my main thing is I will be curious to look at the comparison. What about breathing?
The breathing looked pretty bad. So I did see that clip in Petapixel's video, and it was very noticeable. And even though I think it was it Jordan? I think he's got the... Yeah. He was using it, and he was talking about it being... His words were, it's not that bad, but I don't think he was giving it as much criticism as he should have, given the footage that they showed of it breathing pretty badly. So it didn't look great. And of course, you're going to get the edge with Sony's lenses on that. That's the thing,
right? So...
is it... Go ahead.
No, go.
I was going to jump to another topic, so go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, like, I do have, like, kind of, I have the B&H creator discount.
Yeah.
So that makes that comparison really, really tough.
Oh, yeah.
But if I were to have to buy the 51.2 for $2,000 with all that other praise, like, I think it's a no contest.
Yeah.
I think Kazuto Yamaki is like, we did it, boys.
Yeah.
Like, he's probably over there vibing.
And they really did it, because I saw it on Instagram without realizing what it was. And I was like, why is that I mean, like, why are they posting a 51.4? Like, that's been out for a while. Like, what is this? And I saw the announcement 51.2 because it looks just like it almost looks identical to the 51.4. They somehow packed in more light in almost no extra size and weight. It's an extra 80 grams of weight in like a tenth of an inch higher and wider. It looks almost the same. So kudos to Sigma for somehow packing it in such a small package.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was like really, really photo focused, this is super enticing.
Yeah.
Like that's super dope. Especially I can't wait to watch the video, because if like the bokeh is that nice on something that's just like, where were you going to compromise?
Right.
Like you would go, no, it's fast. The bokeh gets a little crazy at 1.2, but like if it's beautiful, then like damn.
Yeah.
And they've been kind of after that, where they're like, no, listen, we are the premium third-party lens manufacturer. Like we're going to make you something that's just as good as anybody else.
Yeah.
Within the limits of the technology, because obviously they get kind of shafted on the, like I had said, the specific specs that Sony doesn't let them have, like being able to autofocus over 15 frames a second and stuff like that.
Right. Which is
a pain,
only, I mean, that only affects, what is it, A9 III and A1 users, right? Because otherwise you're not getting that anyway. And if you're using an A1 and an A9 III, then you probably aren't going to be. I mean, maybe you're thinking about a Sigma lens at this point because they're so nice, but
we're talking about like almost immeasurable like things. Like, is it actually just those, or does between 9 and 14 frames a second, are you going to see more misses?
It definitely depends on the use case.
Yeah, like if you're really trying to, if you're like me who went from the 2 premium Sony cameras down to the A7 IV, and you're trying to squeeze out every little bit of life that your A7 IV can give you, and I shoot a lot of fast stuff where I'm doing high plus bursts.
Yeah.
Like are you gonna miss a lot more with that? And that's hard to say, but
yeah,
it's, again, for freaking $13.99, and if you're a portrait photographer, this is a freaking no-brainer.
I mean, in the last 6 months, this is like Sigma's 4th very premium lens to release. It's pretty impressive. I mean, we've got the 70-200. We've got the, the one. What was it? 150 to 600 or something wild like that, all in one range that they start from like 50 all the way out to like,
it was 60
to 600. Yeah, that lens.
Yeah, and that was a $2,100 lens or something like that.
We've got the fisheye. Didn't they just come out with the fisheye?
Yeah, that crazy 15 mil. They did and that's a 1.4, I think, isn't it? Like, that's insane.
Yeah. So they're just kind of like, killing it every like 3 months or so right now. This pace is insane.
Yeah. I mean, that's what Kazuto said. Like, every interview he has basically just said, yeah, we're going to make the best things we can, and we're doing that.
It's so funny to me.
We're Sigma, baby.
It's funny to me that they've become known to be so premium now, but they still only have this Sigma FP body that they have that's just hanging out there. And the pictures they showed on Instagram were on the Sigma FP, and everybody knows not to buy a Sigma FP.
Yeah, but it allows Sigma to not have to hold a bias towards any one person. So it is what it is.
It is what it is. It's funny.
I'll never ever feel horrible about Sigma, because I'll never regret the years of using my sweet golden black 17-50 2.8 baby.
Totally.
So I was there from the beginning. We love you, baby.
Oh man, so much chromatic, so purple everywhere, but we love it.
Yeah. I loved when all of my sweet winter woodland photos were just pink hues.
Yes. We had to start somewhere. In fact, I think going back to like some of the all-in-one lenses, my first lens on the Sony A55 was the Tamron 18-250. Man, I had some amazing times with that lens, but what a like non-special lens that is, right? Just it's like what is it, f3.5 to f7.1 or something like that all the way through.
Something like that.
There's just absolutely no depth of field to be had unless you're super close on the 250 end to whatever the subject was. And believe me, I was there a lot. It was so fun though, just to learn on that kind of lens, because you could go back and forth with anything. I was trying to do a lot of like insects and birds, and then I got the macro. Oh, the Sigma 70-300 macro, where just terrible IQ, but you could have a lot of fun.
Was it the awful like DGO or whatever?
Oh,
the one
absolutely.
Was like,
yeah.
It was like $90, and it had the noisiest out of. I had that too. It was sweet. I got it with my 7D.
Yes. Yes.
And we had the 18 to 250s at the camp that I worked at for the 70Ds that they had.
Mm-hmm.
Which was pretty funny. And it really did what you needed for very amateur photographers trying to capture a summer camp.
Yes.
But man, I certainly didn't love it when they would shoot videos with it, because on those compressed old 70Ds, you had no IQ.
Yeah.
You could make it work with some raw files. The 70D sensor was pretty decent, but we love you, Sigma.
Some good times.
Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're crushing it.
It's true.
I have a couple more things here. I looked at this article you had sent me, which was "This bride is furious after a photographer fakes shooting a wedding on film." And it sounds... I don't know if it's just my nature nowadays to just like not believe anything I read anymore, but this feels like every time I go on Reddit and somebody is in a subreddit that's very specific to a thing, and they come up with a story that sounds like a story because it's just a story.
I know. I know it. I know. I know.
And so the TLDR is that this guy has a friend kind of who thinks her wedding's going to be ruined if it's not shot on film, because she can't find anybody under a few $1,000s to shoot an all film wedding, and wants hundreds of photos.
So right there, we know the disconnect of this person who's trying to hire someone has no
person
clue.
Doesn't understand anything.
Yeah.
Like, you're lucky to get like 8 rolls. If you're going to fire, like, you should hire a digital person, then hire like a really stylistic film shooter to go do like a couple of rolls of really nice shots.
Absolutely. That's good advice, actually.
Yeah, like you get like the person that's just going to capture the whole day, and you get that, and then you get like the bangers. You hire that photographer for like the 2 hours instead of the 8 hours, and then you get like your really nice film stuff.
Yeah.
But this person, amateur photographer, just like kind of an enthusiast, thinks it's fun, does a thing or two here, basically gets told, you basically have to do this for me because my wedding's going to be ruined if you don't. Eye roll.
I know.
And then goes on to say, I shot the whole wedding with a bunch of digital stuff, and they were super happy with the images until all of a sudden they realized that I had faked them and that they were digital, and it was just the film look.
Yeah.
But now her husband and her hate me, and this, that, the other thing. It was like a bad anecdote about how you can emulate film and people like the vibe.
By the way, he did this for the equivalent of $320 for anyone wondering. $320 that he probably spent more on. Well, he would have spent more on the film had he shot it on film.
He would have had to pay like $1,500 in film to get her hundreds of images of film photography. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And I don't understand how she would have assumed he actually was shooting film if she hadn't seen him loading rolls of film all day.
Or just do a quick Google search on like what a roll of film on average costs, because then like how does the finances make sense of this?
Or literally anything. This was just like, this was a weird, really short article that perplexed me. I read it today. I was like, I'm going to read it in the morning before we record, so I'm fresh on it. And I was just like filled with too many emotions. I was perplexed. I was a little annoyed. I was surprised it was a petapixel article. It literally felt like whoever the author of the petapixel article literally read this in our film and just like relayed it, because it feels a little fakey fake to me.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely got the same vibe. So I had to deliver this to you with the assumption that, oh my God, if this is real, how ridiculous is this? Which is basically anything these days now.
Yeah. I mean, because like, this is insane. First of all, she's a bad friend for basically saying, if you don't shoot my wedding, like, you're going to ruin my wedding.
Yeah, what a terrible person.
It's like, okay, well, it's a wedding and all photographers cost thousands of dollars. So like, do you know what a wedding is?
Yeah.
You really care about the photos, but you're only willing to pay me $320. Still a bad friend.
Seriously. And if you cared enough about film, I love the very end of this where it says that she didn't want the negatives. I don't even quote, I don't think she even knows about negatives. She just likes the film vibe. So why wouldn't she have been okay? It's just ridiculous all around.
That's what ruined the whole article for me, because that made me feel like that was the point of the article. Why would they end it there if that wasn't?
It's weird. Under the assumption it's real, what a ridiculous thing. I had to send it to you.
I'm perplexed that it was Petapixel, to be honest. But yeah, I did get a laugh. I did get a chuckle.
Yeah,
I felt
it's worth a laugh.
Yeah. It made me feel a lot of things. Yeah. It'll be linked below in the show notes. It was a lot, man. I had a couple other things here, but like none of it's really, really super important. One being Tamron is going to have a 28-75 Mark III for the Z mount being announced. So that was interesting because I still haven't been following it very much, but we talked about how Tamron was like making Z mount stuff that Nikon wouldn't be making.
Yeah.
Except Nikon is making some of those very Tamron-y focal length lenses.
Yeah.
So this is them being able to release their 28-75 on the Z mount, which is interesting. The other one was I wanted to touch on like the Nikon and Red news.
Sure.
But it's a few weeks old now because you and I both went back and forth about needing a little bit more time for the show.
Yep.
But it's not surprising. I think it's really good for Nikon. I think the backing Nikon has for the Red IP and like what Red is still for cinema, I think they've been falling behind a little bit in like the major cinema game, because once Ari kind of popped off with like the LF Mini and like IMAX is huge to get people to theaters, that like it's pretty rare that I was hearing a whole lot of Red on like silver screen, like big movie stuff. So maybe they were kind of struggling to fight with Ari and I guess cheaper cameras. I know a lot of things are still running on Venice stuff and the new whatever the one that starts with a B is, I can't even remember now. But the other Sony cameras. But it's interesting and super dope, and I'm pretty excited about it. I want to see Red Nikon like FX Sony level stuff.
Yeah.
I wonder what that's going to do to the Komodo line. So there's just a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, I mean everything, of course, is speculation at this point, because the things we knew were that Red was in a lawsuit with Nikon, and then a year later they weren't. And this is like, okay, there may be something that has to do with that here going on, but all we can do is speculate about what they may be having, what could be happening. Wow. What could be happening as far as hardware goes. So would I like to see like high-end Nikon cinema cameras? I guess. I don't know. What is that going to do to Red product lines? I don't know what Nikon can give to that, but we just don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
there's not much more I can add. You said it all.
Yeah. I mean, I tried to summarize it as best I could. It'll be really interesting to see like Z mounts on Red stuff. It'll be interesting
that's
to
true.
See some of the, I don't know if they're going to use like the sensor tech, or if even like whatever the Z8 II or something is, if that's just going to be rocking, like if that's going to get internal raw codecs that are like compressed enough to be really good, you're going to start to see a huge shift in like guerrilla filmmakers running high-end Nikon, like, because we already think the Z9 and the Z8's amazing. You and I have both agreed on that since they've launched. They're incredible. Hell, even Jordan Drake at Petapixel thinks that they're incredible, because they are. They're objectively very good.
Yes.
But that internal raw codec is gonna, like, the only competition is Blackmagic. So you could be running for tens of thousands of dollars less these small cameras that have full internal raw with great glass. Frankly, I think all of Nikon's new stuff has been pretty solid. I think people are probably going to like some of those silly, like the Plena and the Nocta and stuff like that. I hope somebody does some crazy filmmaking and only shoot the entire movie at like 0.95.
Yeah, we'll see it, of course.
They're going to be like, this is called In the Dark. And it's just shot at like 50,000 ISO and on freaking knocked. And they're like, look how clean the shadows are. And it's like the whole screen is just shadows. But it's cool. I'm super into it. I'm stoked. The very last thing was a rumor that I saw today, and was interesting because I was looking to get one of these old cameras. A couple of them have popped up really cheaply, and I was like, oh, I should get that just to say that I own a Leica. And it's the old Leica D Lux.
Oh.
Which is an APS-C like point and shoot kind of camera.
Okay.
And it's saying that they're going to release a new Leica Deluxe 8 in May or June to compete with the X100
Oh, wow.
So it'll be kind of in the same price range. It'll be minimalistic like the Q3, but it'll be APS-C, about 24 megapixels, and it'll do the Leica thing.
At what price point, though? If they're really going to compete, at what price point?
Yeah, like 200 euros less than the Fuji.
Okay, if that's true, they're going to get a lot of buyers on that. Like a lot of buyers.
The original Deluxe was not an expensive camera.
Yeah, okay.
It was like a very consumer Leica. And they had a couple of bodies in the 2000s where they were playing around, and there was a couple cameras that came out that were just kind of mad. They had a couple of like non-interchangeable lens cameras, and the Deluxe was one of them. And I don't know. I think that's kind of sweet.
Yeah,
I think that's what that industry needs. That's the only company I can think that would do it in a way that would genuinely compete with a Fuji.
It absolutely is kind of the only other company that could do it and be successful at it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it could be quite good. And I think that sets a precedence for like camera makers to find their own thing and make something that's just good and different.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone's ever called any other Leica camera not good because of what they're supposed to do, right? Like they're designed to be minimalistic, point and shoot cameras that have pretty great image quality and not much else, right? Like they're not fancy in other ways. They don't have tons of tools and functions, but they're supposed to be stylish and they're supposed to be minimalist.
They're elegant.
They're
minimalist. They're elegant
and expensive.
But the glass is great.
Yeah.
The sensors are awesome.
Yeah, if they can do it, I mean, why not?
It'll be pretty cool. I definitely am excited to see what happens. I'm still really hopeful that my Fuji will ship soon.
Yeah.
Because I absolutely want to play with it.
I have one more thing for you.
As just one aside, I was going to say I wasn't going to really bring it up in this show because I don't think it's anything that you or I will ever like talk about or like do. But the other Leica news was the SL3 came out not that long ago, was announced, and I made myself not look at it because I was so thirsty to just sell all my Sony stuff to feel alive. That I was oh, L mount, I could get everything and then get the SL3, and SL3 is amazing, but it's so much money, and it doesn't do anything technically better than my A7 IV. And you know how stupid I would feel after getting rid of my two favorite lenses I've ever owned, and then going, oh, this fancy new toy is not that great after I miss my two favorite lenses I've ever owned.
After all, the lenses do make the difference.
Right. My 35 and the 70 to 200 is everything to me. So but yeah, what was your last thing?
Did you see Nikon's announcement yesterday?
The 28 to 400?
28 to 400 F4 to F8. What are we doing here?
Yeah. I was going to talk about this too. I actually had it up and then it wasn't in the dock. So I actually, it's up right now.
It's Nikon's making a Tamron lens.
Yeah. And what a super zoom.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, from the days of shooting 18 to 250, having 28 to 400 on a body to do basically anything you want. I mean, you're not getting shallow depth of field anywhere, but I mean,
but like there's so much stuff in that people are shooting, especially with ISO being as good as it is, that this doesn't matter. Canon has been proving this forever since they've started releasing all these wild ass R lenses, because they have all these super telephotos that are like, oh, it's only f8.
Right.
And you're like, wait, what?
Right.
So, but $1,300, it has VR, so the whole thing's going to probably have like 7 stops when you have it on one of the best cameras.
Yep.
I'm sure it's probably it's 5.5. Keep in mind, this is a full frame lens.
Yes,
this
it is.
A APS-C.
My immediate thought was, they made something for the Z50 or whatever, ZFC. Yeah. No, this is a full frame lens.
This is an APS-C style super zoom that's on a full frame body.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, how cool is that? I haven't been able to watch any of the videos yet, but
1.59 pounds, so 725 grams. That's really not that heavy for a super zoom like this.
And it's kind of compact.
Yeah, I mean, it does extend quite far out when you do zoom out to 400, but when it's not,
if you throw that boy in your bag, like
no, it's not bad at
travel
all.
with that.
Not
if you put it on like the Z6 II, like a smaller one of the handheld bodies, it's going to be pretty cool. I think that's going to offer quite a lot to that system. It's clear that people want these. They keep releasing. Each company keeps releasing something weird. I mean, Panasonic just did I think it was like 24 or 28 to 200 or whatever that was. So, I mean, people clearly are buying them.
Yeah.
I bet a lot of consumers in Asia buy them. If I were to just venture a guess, and that's because I'm only saying that because every time I see a product that I don't know anybody in like the YouTuber space or any of the photographers that I see that are photographers buy a product, I'm like, oh, this has to just be making a killing in Asia, where like all of those consumers are comfortable always carrying a big camera.
Right.
They're like, oh, I always have an interchangeable lens camera, which like normies don't really do that because we all have our phones. But that's why you see all these like lower end bodies just being bought by everybody. Like the sales are so high, but then you look and it's like the Asia sales.
Right.
So it's just interesting. I do want to see what the average consumer is for like the American audience for these things, but what a freaking lens.
What a lens. And it's not like it's the perfect lens for any one situation, but if you really needed the range and could only bring one lens, what a choice. It's there for you.
You know where this would be really cool is if you were often capturing, like, let's say, honestly, even kids' sports.
That's exactly what I defaulted to.
Dude, if I was doing my kids' soccer games every weekend, I wouldn't even buy any other lenses. I would literally lock this thing at f8 across the whole zoom and then just have like, I would basically look like I was the freaking like ESPN cameraman because I'd be able to get right close up when they're right in front of me. I'd go all the way out to the freaking goals. I would get everything.
It's funny.
And I would make these little videos or whatever. It'd be perfect.
It's funny because that's the scenario I thought of first because let's say as a parent and my kids went into sports and maybe one day I get a 70 to 200 again, which I would hope I do at some point soon. That wouldn't be the ideal lens because if they're playing like soccer or something and they're at the other end of the field, 200 is not enough. And even if you've got a good amount of resolution to crop with, it's not enough. 400, that's enough. I mean,
that's a significant lens.
That's pretty cool. I think a lot of parents are going to really enjoy that. And I think it's tough because at that price point, I don't know that I'd recommend it for someone who's looking for a wildlife lens, but people are going to get it for that too. And I think they're going to enjoy learning to shoot like birds and things on that as well. And this is going to be great for like older folks who know they've got grandkids they want to photograph as well as like the birds in their backyard. It's good for kind of both those things.
Well, yeah, but I mean, so like, okay, I kind of like shooting birds in my backyard sometimes, but I also have kids and want to do the normal stuff. That's a no-brainer. And think about that with the Z5.
Right.
You're at like, what, probably like $2,200.
Yeah. I mean,
full focal range.
Yeah, and these
full frame camera, like...
The range and versatility matters a lot more to those people than like the depth of field and most any other aspect of a lens. So this is going to be a winning lens for a lot of people, and there's a lot of pros who are not going to realize that this thing is going to sell.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I definitely, this would be something that I'd love to play with for like an hour. Just so I could like really see what the IQ is like across the range and stuff like that, because like glass is really good right now.
Yeah.
Like there's no reason to think that, because we were talking about that 18 to 250, which was just abysmal. Mm-hmm. There's no reason for me to believe that this at 400 f8 isn't like more than a usable photo for these sensors that these cameras have.
It's kind of
autofocus.
It's not really possible to buy a new lens with bad optics anymore. It's really just they're all
like
getting so
properly
good.
bad optics.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially if it's a first party lens. Because like if we're talking about some of these Chinese no name brands that are coming out with like these nano anamorphics and all these other crazy things for sub $1,000 a lot of the time. I think the big companies know that they can't just be like, oh, this is a $1,900 lens.
Absolutely. Optics is cool. Nikon's game. That's what they do. They make great glass, and I'm sure it's a great lens.
They sure do, and they will continue to do that. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
It's a great time to be interested in getting into photography. I tell you that.
Absolutely.
Because you can't even go wrong. You can just like spin a wheel. What system am I getting into? And
it's true. You really can do that. And even if it lands on tick, 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 the phone in your pocket, you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah, it's super good. Well, hey man, that was a pretty packed show. I love to see it. I'm glad we were able to link up. I was going to be crazy if we didn't touch base before Paris and London because I'm probably going to have a lot to say.
I can't wait to hear all about it.
Yeah, so be well. We'll catch up, I think, either after this show or sometime this weekend about filters and shooting. And then, for those of you still listening, thanks so much. Please leave a comment. Reach out to us. Follow us on our Instagrams. They're on the screen and in the show notes. We're still kind of shooting on Instagram. Me and David have been a little slow. I'm popping back into it. I'm learning that I can take pictures of things and say what I want, and expressing myself feels good.
Yes.
And I feel like I'm not dying when I do it. So
hey, that's good.
That's the component of my life that I've been missing for so long. So maybe I'm going to jump back on the Tumblr blog tonight and yell into the void and remember what 2012 felt like before the Mayan calendar ended and we all actually stopped existing. This is just a fever dream that we're all having right now. Whoopsie. And the world is... No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you guys for listening. Appreciate you all. Till next time. See ya.
Bye.